Welcome to the Gold Standard here from the 440 Sports Network, a part of Lower Broad Hockey as well. My name is Braden Gall, and you can get to me on, I suppose, the sewers of Twitter.com, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Braden Gall.
All right, I guess it's me. I'm Emma Lingan, and you can get to me at Emma_Lingan.
Just trying to be nice, let the lady go first. I'm Michael Gallagher. You can get to me on Twitter at MGSports_.
There you have it. Lots of stuff today on the show. If you are a subscriber to Lower Broad Hockey, you get your questions answered on the show. Lots of really good questions from you folks about Roman Josi, about the lineup, about growing the game in the city of Nashville and what's sort of happening around the city of Nashville. So lots of really good questions from you folks out there. Actually, a really good one about Bridgestone Arena also as well. So all of that, of course, coming up a little bit later on in the show. Good stuff on the website from you, Michael, about Joakim Kemell and Matthew Wood and the Central Division. So we're going to get to all of that as well. So a lot of stuff to do today on the show. And again, I want to remind everybody, Lower Broad Hockey is who we are affiliated with as a podcast. So that is our subscriber network, our conversations, our chat room, and our content is over there. You can check that out. Emma's got a great NHL weekly newsletter on Fridays. Michael's doing work. And I just want to remind everybody that this is sort of the part of the year where nothing happens. So I want to set expectations for everybody out there. We are not going to be grinding out everyday stories over there for the next couple of months. But when training camp starts and when September rolls around the start of September, we've got a lot of big news coming for you guys, and we've got a lot of plans for coverage of the regular season in what should be, folks, a really exciting time in Nashville. I was just at Titans camp, and the Titans have a new coach. Nashville SC has a new coach. The Nashville Predators first-year head coach did very good things last year. First-year GM did very good things last year. I just left SEC Media Days, in which everybody feels very excited about a 12-team playoff and a video game, apparently. And so I just think it's a really exciting time to be a sports fan in Nashville, and the Nashville Predators are absolutely a huge part of that moving forward. So stay tuned in September. We got a lot of fun stuff coming. I can't remember a time. Emma, I know you're not a long-time Nashvilleian, but I can't remember a time with this much excitement across all professional sports teams in the market. It's actually quite remarkable.
Yeah, you're right. I'm not a longtime Nashvilleian, so I really can't speak on that. But it certainly seems like it, at least from my conversations with other longtime Nashvilleians. That there's just kind of even for me, like I have plenty of friends here who are maybe not like big sports fans, but even those people are starting to ask me about like, oh, so how about the Preds? Oh, I saw the Preds in the news and things like that, which is it's new for me, and it is exciting.
Is it any different? I mean, like, you've been around the team a couple of years, and there were certainly lots of changes from the first year to the second year that you were in town, and now do you get a sense of how different it is today? Like, I know you and Gover were talking about the schedule. I know lots of folks have talked about the schedule. They're going to have Dallas. They have 9 of their first 12 at home. It's going to be a very exciting first couple of weeks of the season for people in Nashville to see all their new toys on the ice together. And I feel like it's got to feel different though, right? Even in your 3 years or 4 years of experience, it's got to feel different.
It does. I mean, even just kind of around the team, again, you mentioned the year my first full off season was, the transition from John Hines to Andrew Brunette and David Poyle to Barry Trotz. And there was a lot of change, and you could kind of just feel just around the team, even there was a lot of like unease, and guys didn't really know, like, okay, what direction are we going in as an organization, as a team? Is my job safe? I don't know. And it was kind of like they gave a lot of, in media scrums and things like that, they would give a lot of those like kind of, I don't know, scripted type answers that it's like, yes, we feel good about the direction of the organization. I'm like, you are talking through your teeth right now. And like now it feels a lot more genuine. It feels like guys, same with the fans, right? Like people know, okay, we know what this organization is trying to do now. They're trying to go win a Stanley Cup, and we have not had that sense of, finality in recent years. And so it's been cool to see.
And Michael has nothing to say. All right.
I didn't know if I was supposed to, if you were going to change topics or anything. But
no,
yeah.
you've been here. Like, how long have you been in Nashville? You've been here like 10 years. You've covered the team for a long time. Like you know, the last time there was this type of energy in the fan base, the media, the team, and to your point, Emma, a clear direction had to be the year after the Cup run, where they paid Johansson a ton of money and they went out and won a President's Trophy. Like that's the last time, and that before the pandemic feels like 100 years ago.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I feel like the last time there was this much excitement around the fan base and just people talking about the Preds, them being in the news, NHL.com talking about them. They're like all over national networks everywhere. The last time that people were talking about them this much was after the year after the Cup run. And I think that it does feel like it was, 15, 20 years ago, because the pandemic felt like a decade in itself. But I do think that it's exciting. It's exciting as a journalist getting to cover it, because when the team is losing and you know you're going to go into a locker room talking to players that don't want to talk to you, they're pissed off, they just lost. Like, it's no fun to do this job. I mean, it's still fun because of the job, but it's not as much fun as it is when the team's good, when they're winning, when fans are talking about it. Like, I remember during the Cup run, and I was still kind of a young reporter at that time, but during the Cup run, I would walk into Bridgestone Arena and I would just get stopped on the staircase by fans that just followed me on Twitter, that just wanted, they may have, followed me and knew who I was, but they just wanted to talk. And I would have 10, 15 minute long conversations with fans in the hallways of Bridgestone Arena about the team. And I feel like the excitement that we're seeing now, it's kind of the same feeling. And you haven't been able to say that for the last 4 or 5 years, but it's a good time to be a Preds fan.
It comes up a lot. That's what I'm noticing. Is it's just like, normally this time of year, SEC Media Days, Titans camp is open as of today. Normally people are just sort of chatting about football. That's what they're talking about. And I can't, the amount of like casual conversations with friends or family or just people in the community where they're just like, man, like, look what the Preds did in free agent. It's just, it comes up so much more in casual conversation than I can remember. And that's, I mean, I think that speaks to where we're at. So again, a lot of questions from you guys in the Lower Broad Hockey chat. That's over on Substack. So go sign up. It's a great time to be a fan, and we're going to have lots of great stuff for you coming in September. Lots of announcements coming and pending. So go join right now. Go subscribe. If you are a founding member, you're probably going to get some insight into what is coming in September. But we got a lot of good questions. Roman Josi, is he a Hall of Famer? I know Josiah's already in the comments here about that. We got a question about that. Got a question about Juuso Parssinen playing in the lineup. Where would he fit? And then, of course, also a question about junior hockey team in Tennessee, which I find to be super interesting. A question about Bridgestone Arena's future. So a lot of good stuff from you listeners and subscribers. You guys go right to the top of the list. If you ask questions over there in our chat room and are a part of that community, you're going to get asked first. So I want to start with the Central Division. I want to get both of y'all's thoughts on this because, Michael, you wrote this. I guess you put this all together, sort of the additions and subtractions of everybody in the division. And it seems like you came up with a pretty clear winners and losers in the Central Division. Do you feel like you have we've had conversations about expectations, and we have conversations about sort of the top three being Dallas, Colorado, and Nashville from a who can win the division standpoint. Do you get a clear sense of who you think is now either the pecking order in the division, but also who won and lost in the offseason?
I think so. I mean, if you go read the story that I have on Lower Broad Hockey, I kind of looked at it. I was trying to find the best way to quantify who improved the most and who kind of got worse. And ESPN did a lot of the legwork. Actually, one of their writers had a goals above replacement model, which is a good way to kind of quantify. Like if you're looking at the Predators, scroll to the top of this here. Steven Stamkos, he has a 16.2 goals above replacement. Brady Shea, 16 goals above replacement. Marchessault, 14.7. So they added a lot of players. And when you look at their key departures, their biggest ones were Ryan McDonough. You're losing 7.6 GAR. Kiefer Sherwood, 4.7 GAR. So it was a good way to put it into a numbers-based system of quantifying who improved, who didn't. And if you look at all the teams that are in the Central, it was kind of nice how it broke up into 4 teams really improved and 4 teams didn't. And the 4 teams that improved the most, Chicago, Nashville, St. Louis, and Utah. Teams that got worse, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. And when you're looking at that, like Chicago's not going to be a playoff team this year. St. Louis might be a borderline fringe playoff team, but probably not. Utah, they're still trying to figure out what they are. So Nashville's really the big winner because they improved the most from a numbers standpoint and just from the players they added. And the teams that got worse, Colorado, Dallas, Minnesota, Winnipeg, 3 of those teams are the teams that were ahead of Nashville in the standings, and you probably think Colorado and Dallas are the big competition. I don't think Winnipeg is, with just how much talent they lost and the little bit that they added, I don't really see Winnipeg being a threat this year. So I think there's a pretty good understanding based off of all the offseason moves. Like, okay, Colorado and Dallas got worse, but they're not so much worse that they're down on Chicago's level. Like, they lost a couple key pieces, but they're still going to be the top of the division. And the Predators got better, but not so much better that they clearly blew past Colorado and Dallas. So I think the top 3 in no particular order: Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg, or excuse me, Colorado, Dallas, and Nashville. Then I think in the next tier you have Minnesota, St. Louis, and Winnipeg that are kind of battling. That could be like that fringe playoff team. Then you have everybody else that's below them. And I think the division kind of shook out based off of the offseason moves, kind of how we were basically what we were saying a couple weeks ago when we said, This is the order after all the free agent signings. This is the order we feel like it's going to be. The 1, 2, 3 is Colorado, Dallas, and Nashville.
Yeah, I do. I think it's important. You did mention this, Mike, but I think just to hammer home that even though Colorado and Dallas got worse, like, they were still in a much better position than Nashville was at the start of the offseason. So it's not like they have by any means dipped below Nashville's level, I don't think. But I think it's more like they have come down a little bit and Nashville has shot up a lot. So they're a little bit more on the same plane now, because I think, Colorado still has, like, they still have the great equalizer in Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar and guys like that. But then Dallas still has this unreal offensive depth. And so there's still going to be forces to contend with. But I would agree that I think that Nashville has kind of supplanted Winnipeg in that pecking order in the Central Division for, like, who could realistically compete, for the top of the division.
And
I mean, you look at Winnipeg; their departures are just they're going to hurt a lot more than what Dallas and Colorado lost. You're talking about Tyler Toffoli, Laurent Brossoit, Sean Monahan, Brendan Dillon, Nate Schmidt. You're talking about 2 really good, solid defensemen, 2 pretty good offensive players, a really good 1A, 1B kind of goaltender there. And I mean, Colorado, their biggest loss was Sean Walker, and they only really had him for 20 games in the regular season. I mean, Dallas, Joe Pavelski, Chris Tanev, Ryan Suter, Yanni Hakanpää, like, those are pretty big departures. But and we talked about this in the playoffs. Dallas is one of the deepest teams, and they can, if there's a team in the Central that can withstand losing big players like that, it would be Dallas and Colorado.
Well, does Winnipeg at all feel to you guys like where Nashville was 2 years ago? I'm not saying like talent for talent or player for player or whatever, but it does feel like Winnipeg had its chance. It had its quote unquote window, which I hate. I don't love putting windows on teams, but like, it did have a moment there for a few years where they felt like a really capable team. Do you feel like that is now a different situation, that they are now going to have to go into a rebuild situation, or do you think they can maintain?
I think they're in a rebuild situation, because you look at Rick Bowness retiring, and they have a new head coach, and they lost, like I said, some of the players I just mentioned that they lost, and their top prospect, Rucker McGroarty, wants a trade. I mean, it's never a good sign when you have a new regime coming in and your top prospect's like, nope, I want the hell out of here. So I feel like they still have. I mean, look, if they trade Nikolai Ehlers, then yes, that's waving the white flag. That's the rebuild. As long as he's still on the team and they still have some of the guys that they have, like, they still have some guys that can put the puck in the net, and they have some decent defensemen. But the fact that your top prospect wants out and there's a new head coach that's coming in, that he doesn't even want to be like, okay, let's see if we can make this relationship work. That just shows me that that whole franchise is kind of in disarray.
Agreed.
Cool. The only one has thoughts on the Winnipeg Jets.
All right, no, that's fine. It's fine.
No, I have thoughts. They're just the same thoughts that you had, so I feel like people didn't need to hear me say the same thing.
So my question to you guys about wrapping this up, because a great piece, gives you a whole data analysis layout of each team. I'm curious. I don't think I would call the Preds last year like the breakout sleeper team. I don't think that's fair, although they were significantly better than we anticipated. They hit the over on everything, right? Points, wins, positioning in the standings. So maybe that is what I should call them. They clearly have expectations now, as do Dallas and Colorado. Is there a team that you like, that either of you guys like in this division? Again, we're way early here, so we're having some fun summer conversation. But, like, is there a team that you like to be this year's Nashville, like last year's Nashville? Does that make sense? A team that comes out of nowhere, maybe wins a wild card spot. Like, is Arizona going to all of a sudden put it all together with all these draft picks? Like, I'm just curious where you guys fall on sort of the bottom half of the division.
Arizona's not a team.
Doesn't exist.
Sorry. Utah. That's the first one. That's the first one. We're gonna have to like put $1 in the jar every time somebody says Arizona.
No, I think that. Are you asking just in the Central or just
in the Central? Is there like we know teams jump up and surprise people? The Predators did it last year.
Yeah.
So I'm curious who is this year's Nashville Predators that is all of a sudden going to be, because I don't think it would be a surprise if Winnipeg, if they keep Ehlers, if Winnipeg's competing, if Minnesota's competing, like those are teams that have been good in the last few years. I'm just curious if you think there's anybody that's a surprise.
I would say maybe Minnesota or Utah. I think to be last year's Nashville Predators, you have to enter the season with very low expectations. And I think both of those teams, definitely Utah more so.
Yeah.
But like, again, the reason the Predators were such a breakout success last year, and I don't mean to air quote it like they weren't successful, but I mean, how they performed relative to their expectations going into the season was so drastically different. And so I think if you think of a team like Winnipeg, even despite all the points that we just laid out, I think they're still a team where, again, as long as they have Ehlers there and they have Hellebuck, you know, the expectations are still going to be higher.
Yeah.
Whereas last year Nashville comes in and everyone was just like, well, let's see. Let's just see what happens. And I feel like that's kind of how people are maybe with Utah right now, maybe a little bit Minnesota. I don't know. Minnesota, I was having a conversation with someone recently and they were like, is it me or is Minnesota just kind of boring this year? Like it just seemed like they didn't really do much. Like their big signing was Yakov Trenin, which should probably tell you something.
Welcome to John Hines hockey.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. There's I guess 2 years ago's Nashville Predators. Go watch Minnesota. You got Yakov Trenin and John Hines.
Hoorah.
In a couple of years, I think Minnesota could be in that category. I love what they did in the draft. I hate that they ended up getting Zeev Buium where they did. But I mean, Dania Yurov, what was it, last year, 2 years ago? They're building a really good prospect pool. So I think in a couple of years, Minnesota is going to be a team to watch out for. I wouldn't put Winnipeg in that category for the simple reason, like, they still have Cole Perfetti, Adam Lowry, Kyle Connor, Ehlers, Nino Niederreiter. Like, they have a decent defense core. Like, I mean, they still have Connor Hellebuck. Whenever you have a perennial Vezina caliber goaltender, and we've talked about this with the Preds and Saros, even when they were terrible 2 years ago, we're like, well, with a goalie like Saros, if they can just get in, he could steal a series. The same thing with Hellebuck. I don't think they would be a surprise team. I think Emma's right. If I had to pick, it would be between Minnesota and Utah. But I mean, if I'm looking at Minnesota right now, like Marco Rossi, Matt Boldy, and Kirill Kaprizov, really the only guys I know on that team that I think could potentially do anything. But if I'm looking at Utah, I mean, Logan Cooley with a year of experience under his belt. I mean, you have some other guys that a lot of young guys are going to get some opportunity as well. You have Lawson Krause. I mean,
Clayton Keller.
There's just a lot of players on that roster. Then you look at what they added. I mean, getting John Marino, Ian Cole, Miguel Sergeyev. I mean, those, you basically just rebuilt half of your blue line at the draft just from trades. It didn't even cost you really anything other than late round picks. I think Utah can be the surprise team because that blue line is going to be a lot better this year. And I think when you have a guy like Clayton Keller that can put up 80 points, then you have Logan Cooley and some other young players that have got a year of experience under their belt. Like, I think they could be the surprise team in the Central.
I'm with you. Michael. I think that's they've been building for this for a while, so they have to do something. But
I also wouldn't be surprised if they were still 1 year off. This could be a learning year, and kind of maybe next year could be their year. But if I had to pick one for this year, it's got to be Utah.
Did we find a Jonathan Marchessault burner account here? So we got one question. By the way, if you want to jump into the comments, please do jump into the comments. If you give us a thumbs up on YouTube, we'd appreciate that. And if you're watching on Twitter or Facebook, please give us a share. We do appreciate it. But this is from BAL Loop 614. Do we know why Marshy did not get an intro presser yet, or did I just miss it? But then 2 minutes later, we get a question from Mr. Brazil. Do you know why Marshy has not had his intro presser yet? Which one of these is the Jonathan Marchessault burner account, guys? Which one? And why didn't he have I think he did a Zoom, I think. I don't know.
As I say, he did have his intro presser. It was just over Zoom. He hasn't had an in-person presser yet.
Yeah, that stuff is just, it's all kind of centered around their individual schedules, because this is the off season for them. And like an important thing to remember is that the players do not owe you or us or anyone anything during the off season. Like anything that they do, whether it's, media availabilities or public appearances, anything like that, it's truly out of the goodness of their heart, because they are not required to be anywhere. And so it'll probably just depend on, whenever it usually centers around when these players come to town to look at houses or look at schools or whatever it is. And he's got a family too. So
we're going to see him at training camp. So he doesn't owe anyone anything. Like Emma just said, like he's got to find a place to live. He's got to find places for his kids to go to school. Like that, he's packing up his life in Vegas and moving it to Nashville. I do not care if he blows us off up until the regular season opener.
But I will say this. I think he will be the most intriguing personality to cover of all of the new faces. Like he was already he wasn't spicy in the interview that Adam did with him when he was talking about like, hey, I can't believe Vegas didn't offer. He was kind of giving us some insight into how Vegas and the negotiation went. I don't know. Like I think
spicy's a good word for
it. I think he's pissed off. I think he's pissed off for greatness. And I think from a personality standpoint, I think he's got some of that fecal agitation as well, which is what you want on the team, especially on the top six with the ability to score 40. I think he might be the more of all the names they brought in. Like I think he's Stamkos is the bright neon flashing name, right? Like he's the potential Hall of Famer with like all the things that come along with his sort of career. But I think Marchessault is going to be the more interesting quote from like a coverage standpoint.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he's coming in with a chip on his shoulder. I mean, yeah, Stamkos is as well because Tampa didn't want him back, and there's some hard feelings there. But at least, at least Tampa was upfront with him. Vegas is like, we want you back, but we're going to do this shady, underhanded, weird-ass contract where you're going to get your money, but it's going to be in like 15 years from now. Like when you scorn a player like that, regardless of whether he signed with Utah or if he signed with wherever he signed, you're going to get a really good season out of Marchessault because he, like you said, he's pissed off for greatness. He wants to shove it in Vegas's face.
You don't normally get like a detail like, oh no, they offered me the same amount of money. Like that's not a detail you normally just get off the cuff from a player or a coach or a GM. Like that's just not. It may not mean much to anybody, but like that's a tiny little. The fact that he felt comfortable enough to say that to me is sort of the insight you need from him. So anyway, we'll see when he gets here. But that's again.
What I also like about it too is everyone praises Vegas as being this really savvy like salary cap team, and he kind of exposed them a little bit, and he put them on blast and was like, yeah, they work around the salary cap because they do kind of some shady stuff like this. So which I thought was interesting because everyone talks about how Vegas, they're just like geniuses when it comes to navigating the salary cap. Well, they do some shady stuff, and Jonathan Marchessault wasn't afraid to put it out there.
Well, even with all of their salary cap gymnastics and shenanigans and whatever other word you want to use for it, I think like at least from speaking from my own point of view, I think that I looked at that over the last few years with, I was impressed. I was like, you know what? They found some loopholes and they exploited them. Good for them. But I also kind of had in the back of my mind the entire time, like, eventually this is going to catch up with them. They're not going to be able to keep this going forever. I mean, unless, they're going to hire a hitman on Mark Stone every January to go out and, injure him again. I don't think that
seems like a risky strategy.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be sustainable. So, I mean, like they won with it. They won a cup with it. And now
I don't know, though. Probably a lot of them walking around in Vegas, right? Like, if you do need a hitman, like Vegas is the right market, I feel like, to be in to go get that taken care of.
They're just going to add Tanya Harding on staff.
Yeah.
Wow, that is
special assistant to the GM.
With the Olympics starting this week, that is a wonderful reference, and I'm not sure anyone under the age of 30 has any clue who that is, and I'm feeling very, very old right now. So there you go. A lot of Brando says a lot of holes in the desert. That is true. Dark has a really good question about sports media. We'll get to that coming up in just a second. I do want to ask Mike the story on Lower Broad Hockey, of course, about Joakim Kemell. I don't want you to give it all away, but tell people sort of what your large sort of your thesis going in was, and then what you took away from the story, and then I want everyone to go read it, of course.
Yeah, so when I was first thinking about writing this, I was just kind of looking at the numbers. I mean, everyone knows I'm a numbers guy. I'm big on stats. And I was just purely looking at, goals, points, all that stuff. And I was like, man, Kemell didn't really pop off this year like I thought he would. And I know a lot of other people were expecting a big year out of him. And I was just kind of curious, as like, why was that? He played in a top 6 role. He got pretty regular minutes. Like, he was a focal point of their offense. And I was like, well, it was also an adjustment for him because basically Andrew Burnett's system kind of trickled down to the Milwaukee Admirals. Carl Taylor had the 80-20 split where it was 80% Burnett's offense, 20% his. And I was also thinking to him, like, man, the kid was 19 and he had just turned 19. Like, I can't imagine being that young going to play pro hockey after playing in, the top league in Finland. But there's a difference between playing against the top guys in Finland and playing against top guys over in North America. So when I, talked to Derek Newmeyer of McKean's Hockey, we talked about it, doing our Scouts Perspective series. We talked a lot about some of these guys, and he had some really interesting things to say about Kemell. And he had some really good points about why, like, yeah, on the face of it, the numbers weren't where you wanted them to be, but because of his skill set and the things that he can do things on the ice, and he can do things with a puck that no one else in this prospect system can do. So it may take him a little bit longer to get there, but as Barry Trotz has said, like, he's okay with that. And I think the kind of, premise we were working with, and that the conclusion we arrived at was basically, it may take him a little bit longer to get there, but it's not going to be like a 3-year long process. Like, once he figures it out, he's going to figure it out. And I wouldn't be surprised if he just shot through the rankings and was in Nashville really quickly. But if you want to go read it, I put a lot of work into it. Some really good insight from Derek in there too, just talking about all the things that Kemell had to do and why basically the fact that, sure, 40 points doesn't look that impressive, but as an 18 turning 19-year-old playing, his first taste of a pro hockey experience, like, it was actually pretty impressive, the things that he did. And he pointed out some of the things that don't show up in the score sheet too. So Go read it, put a lot of work into it. It was a really good story. I'm proud to say that I wrote it, and I had some great insight from a scout which I love getting other people. Like, we can talk about this all we want, but we don't watch these games and evaluate these players with the same mind that a scout does. And it was interesting to hear what Derek was saying about some of the things, like his positioning, some of his puck handling skills, kind of everything that he does away from the puck, and why that's almost just as important as what he does with the puck. So it was a pretty fun story to write.
It was a great story. Everyone should definitely go read it. I think, obviously I personally have limited experience watching Kemell play in person. But I did probably the closest I got to really getting to evaluate him was at the rookie tournament last summer, when I traveled with the team still, and it was in Florida against the Panthers, Lightning, and Hurricanes rookies and prospects. And
pretty good franchises right now.
Yeah, they're all right. I think that, you talked about those things that don't show up on the score sheet. Kemell, first of all, that slap shot, my Lord, I could watch that on repeat just for days. But
whoa, settle down. It's before lunchtime on a Wednesday.
Dare I say a Steven Stamkos like one-timer?
Look,
it's a little warm in here.
I don't think that that's too far-fetched to say. But he's one of those guys that has that ability to, like, take over a game. Like, I saw that in the rookie tournament. Again, like, different kind of situation there. It's not a real game per se, but you saw flashes of it, or I saw flashes of it. And it's just like, ooh, he is really not that far away. Like, once he gets it together, this kid's going to be like, he's going to be a force. And so I think, I don't know, expectations have maybe shifted because people think, like, again, after last year, before the Preds went out and made all these big free agent signings, people were all about the youth movement. And so I think people wanted him to be ready right now. Like, they want all these, like him and Zach LaRue and all these guys, like, all right, bring them up right now. And it's like, just because they're not ready right now, that's okay. Because to be fair, they really weren't supposed to be, like, and they don't need to be.
This is one of the biggest, I think one of the biggest developments outside of the fact that they're trying to compete really at a high level on the NHL level. Like, the whole strategy of this offseason is designed to create patience for their prospects. Like, that's the whole point. And I think they don't do this stuff. They don't go spend all this money. Yes, the cap space and the timing, it all works out. But you don't go do all of this if all those guys are ready to go. Like
Right.
you are buying them time and competition and scoring and all the stuff you've already done. So I think the whole point of what they're doing is to create some patience and some time for these younger guys. And Josh says, easy now. Some of us are trying to watch.
Listen,
That's the beauty of what Barry Trotz is doing. When we talked about basically like you sign Stamkos to a 4-year deal, so that gives you a four-year window to maximize him and go win a cup. Well, guess what? When that 4-year window is closed, if he doesn't re-sign and he's gone, you have Kemell, you have Leroux, you have Svechkov. All of your prospects right now in 4 years, if they're not already on the roster, they will be on the roster. So they've created this system of sustainability to where when you have some of your older guys that kind of come out, you can just supplement them with the young guys that you've been building up for the last 3 or 4 years.
All right.
I've been saying this all year. I've been saying this all year, 2 years really, that like getting an older guy, it has to be the right older guy and at the right term and all of that, but it doesn't block a roster spot from someone else. They're not getting those older guys if they think that there's a prospect who's ready for that roster spot.
Right.
And no one like, I don't know. I've been banging this drum for a long time where I'm just like, look, it's just buying them time. That's not a bad thing.
Well, sounds like me for the last year. I've been banging the drum that Kemell wasn't ready. I don't know how many people I got into disagreements with on Twitter that were saying, call him up, he's ready, and he had a great 20 game sample size at the end of last year, and he looked good. But we saw this year he wasn't ready. You have to be patient with these guys. I do think Kemell, I've said this before, call it a hot take, whatever, I think Kemell has the potential to be the best forward prospect this franchise has ever drafted. I'm not backing down on that. I think he will hit once he gets to the NHL, but I think we're looking at a year, maybe 2 before he gets to the NHL. That doesn't mean he's not going to be ready by then, but it also means that the roster in the NHL is in such good shape, you don't need him to be ready.
And I think that's a really important point. Two things can be true. They're not ready, and it's still one of the better farm systems the Preds have ever had. You know what I mean? Like just because they're not ready today doesn't mean they're still not as deep.
I wouldn't even say one of. This is the best farm system they've ever had.
I especially at the forward position. There's no question. I agree. And so, again, all of these things can be true. They can compete right now and buy themselves time because the players aren't ready. And the players could be very, very good in 2 to 4 years. So, like, all of it could be true. Now, clearly that's what Trotz's vision and plan is. Like, that's it. Like, that it's not overly complicated. I think you guys have been saying that for a while. So, all right, let's answer some questions here. Go read the Kemell story. Really good stuff. There's also a good one on Matthew Wood up there. There's a debate about goalies. There's some all kinds of good stuff. We're going to try to give you guys 1 or 2 free pieces of content per week, and then the rest of it's got to be a part of the community, a part of the subscriber base. And then again, we've got some big news coming in September, so stay tuned on all of that.
We'll also be starting up a monthly mailbag as well.
And Mike, I know you're working on this too. We're going to have a lot more you're going to have more of these kind of prospect breakdowns, but also kind of give everybody a quick teaser on what you're working on from the prospect standpoint for everybody.
Yeah, so we got a story on Zachary Leroux coming up later this week. In the group chat I put out there, asked who do you guys want more feature stories on. I think Askarov was one of them. I actually spoke with Derek about him, so we'll have some great information on Askarov. I know Aiden Fink is a hot topic in the group chat, so we will definitely have some Aiden Fink. We'll have some Aiden Fink stories too. Svechkov, a couple other guys. I didn't talk to Derek about all these guys, so some of them will just be my own analysis. But yeah, we're doing that, and then the beginning of August we are going to have a prospect guide. I'm still currently building it. I know we've been teasing it for the last couple weeks. If you know what the Athlon Sports College Football Magazine is, think that, but with hockey. Think
that is not a cross promo I expected, but yes, way to go, Athlon Sports.
Well, I mean, when I get ready for college football season, I go buy the Athlon Sports College Football Magazine because there's a lot of great work that goes into it.
As someone who's been employed for 17 years by Athlon Sports, I appreciate it.
But yeah, so when you think of what this is going to be, think of that. It's basically going to be a downloadable PDF we'll have on our website. You have to be a subscriber to Lower Broad Hockey in order to get it. But I rank the prospects 1 through 25. I'll have complete breakdowns with scouting reports and some quotes and stuff on the top 10 prospects, and then everyone else 11 through 25. We'll have little mini breakdowns of them, and then all the guys that weren't ranked in the top 25, we'll have listings for them, and we'll let you know like what their NHL ETA is, what they're kind of projected as to be a top line center, a bottom 4 wing or whatever. All the prospect information you could want is going to be in this one little downloadable prospect guide for you to have. And the good thing is I plan on doing it to where it'll keep its value throughout the rest of the season.
Where else are you going to get a breakdown of the Nashville Predators farm system from someone on the Nashville Predators beat? How about that? There's a lot of breakdowns out there from the national folks, and they're great and wonderful and worth considering and consuming as well. But where else are you going to get an almanac delivered right to your email box? So make sure you subscribe. Lower Broad Hockey.
And the first week of August, we are also going to have, I'm going to probably just going to do a video podcast like you and Adam have been doing for a couple big topics. We're going to have a pretty good NHL draft prospect guru that a lot of you know and love. I'm going to have him on, and we are going to probably spend 15, 20 minutes breaking down the 2024 Predators draft class.
We have lots of really fun plans. I've put in a few requests. There's been a few requests that have been put in, and it looks like we're going to have some stuff worked out for you guys. I think we're going to try to do some really interesting and creative things. Like I'm going to take a look at the entire history of Nashville Predators goaltending development and analysis. So we're going to have some really cool stuff for you guys. All right, let's get to some questions here. And I think all these questions are from the group chat, of course, the chat room over there on Lower Broad Hockey. This is from Josh. Josh, of course, you got things started today. Summertime question. Is Josi headed towards the Hall of Fame? I think yes. No player with 2 Norris trophies has been left out. And while he doesn't have 2, he was an inch away from his second. He's consistently one of the top defenders in the league with an extended period, over an extended period of time. What do y'all think? This might be a really short debate, guys, because I don't know how, if Roman Josi plays 2 more seasons and then disappears off the face of the earth, I think he's a Hall of Famer. I don't know if he is today, but I think he's all but guaranteed a Hall of Fame jacket or bust, or what do they do in the NHL? I don't know. What do you get? So
if Shea Weber's a Hall of Famer, Roman Josi's a Hall of Famer. That's how I see it.
I was just going to say that. I mean, I feel like there's no room for arguing with this. And look, the guy is he's 34, and he's had his two of his best seasons. His 2 best seasons has been in the last 3 years. Like the definition of getting better with age, it's Roman Josi, and not like anyone needs to make this case for him. But I mean, the first Swiss-born player with 500 career assists. He's the only Preds player with 500 career assists. I think he's got the most points of any Swiss-born player in NHL history. Like, you can just go on and on and on. Yeah, the Norris Trophy win does kind of validate a little bit. But even without winning that Norris Trophy, like Emma said, if Shea Weber's a Hall of Famer, Roman Josi's a Hall of Famer. He's got a much better resume. He has the Norris Trophy. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins another one. I think he's probably got 2 or 3 years of elite hockey left, and then probably like 2 or 3 years of like good, sustainable hockey before he calls it a career. I mean,
I don't know what the argument is against him. I don't know what the argument is. I think Pekka, because of his standing and his status with we're sort of when he came around and sort of what he accomplished, I think is obviously regarded as the greatest Pred of all time. I'm not sure as of today, Roman Josi's not already ahead of him. Like, I don't, maybe this is not even a debate worth having because they're just 2 guys that everybody loves. But I mean, is he a Hall of Famer today? Maybe that's the argument. Like, maybe he needs a couple more years. I don't know, but he's the greatest player in franchise history, at least in my mind. And I think he's a surefire Hall of Famer. So I don't think he needs.
I don't think he needs to play more. I think today he's a Hall of Famer.
He disappears off the earth, Emma. Right now, he's still a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
Josh, I hope that answers your question. There was not a lot of debate there, discussion on that topic. I thought, I guess I'm not surprised that that's where we ended up with Roman Josi.
If you want a story where we list all of his career accomplishments, Josh, I'll be more than happy to do that for you.
and make sure you put a video of him in there trying to hit a baseball, just so that we can show folks.
Yeah, Roman Josi will not be in Cooperstown anytime soon, but I think he has earned a spot in Toronto.
He's the one thing Roman Josi cannot do: hit a baseball.
The only thing.
The only thing. All right. Kyle says in the chat, what are the odds that Juuso Parssinen gets a shot between Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault as the second center in training camp, assuming that's what they will try first? There's a lot of questions here to answer. I remember when he first came up, he played well on that first line for a stint. I feel like his size and strength down low and his sneaky creative offensive talent could be a great complement to help bringing out his game if he has a good camp. Thoughts? Look, we've talked a lot about Evangelista and we talked a lot about Novak. We have not talked a lot about Juuso Parssinen starting in that second center role. My first thought, before you guys can have the floor and go with this, is I think everything should be on the table. And I think Andrew Brunette is going to spend all of camp trying to figure out what all of the things that are working, and that's the job. So if Parsonen comes in and has an elite camp and is great, and his size and his playmaking ability work on that line, great. That's great development for the Nashville Predators. But I think everything should be on the table at this point.
Yeah. And I think that's the point of training camp, right? Especially, I mean, it's the point of training camp, period, but also when you have all of these new additions. And again, we've been saying this for a while, but you have all these new pieces that on paper make the team better, but you got to figure out where they fit that is actually going to maximize their potential to make this team better. And, we're all saying, oh, Stamkos and Marchessault, on the wing with Tommy Novak or whatever it is. And I keep thinking back, and I know I've made this point before, but I keep thinking back to 2 years ago when the Preds traded for Ryan McDonough, and everyone was saying oh my gosh, it's perfect. They found their second pairing of defensemen. It's going to be Ekholm's going to shift and he's going to play with McDonough and it's going to be incredible. Spoiler, it was not incredible. And so I think that sometimes you just need to, again, you just got to throw shit at the wall and see what sticks sometimes. And that's what training camp is for. So I don't, I'm not surprised if they try that among, 100 other options too. I mean, especially when you have needs at center, and Parsonen can play center. I wouldn't mind them trying that one bit.
I mean, look at training camp last year. There was a couple of days when Cole Smith was skating on the top line. I don't think that the goal was to put Cole Smith on the top line for the season, but they at least tried it out, saw what it looked like. Maybe it could be something that they go to if they need to. And I think the same thing with Parsonen. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get some work with Stamkos and Marchessault in training camp. Do I think he opens the season on as the second line center with those guys as wingers? No, but I do think that at least with Parsonen, and I guess you could say Tomasino to a degree, it almost feels like there's one roster spot for Parsonen, Tomasino, Jankowski, or two roster spots, sorry, for Tomasino, Parsonen, Jankowski, and Cody Glass. And I really feel like that those guys, the bottom six is going to be decided by a combination of two of those four guys. And I think that Parsonen, I don't think that they're looking for him to be into the top six. They really don't need him to be. I mean, you just signed Tommy Novak to a contract extension. Yeah. You're paying him $3.5 million a year for a reason. He's going to get first crack at that spot. But I think Parsonen, they at least want to try him out with different players to see where he fits, because I think he's reached the point where he's kind of too good to be in the AHL right now, but he's not quite ready for the NHL. But this is going to be the training camp where they make a decision on where Parsonen is going to play and if he's going to be a part of this roster long term.
And he was definitely shot out of a cannon. That first little stint we saw him a couple years ago. So it's not like we haven't seen some level of production out of him. And I think he
can be a top six forward too. Yeah. When he was on the top line with O'Reilly and Forsberg for the first 10 games, he looked really good. And why Brunette moved him off that line, we never got a really direct answer as to why. And then when they took him off that line and put him elsewhere, he didn't really thrive. So they sent him to the AHL. But he's someone who can, if you put him with the right players, he can be an effective player.
He's also got to stay healthy.
Yeah,
that's an issue too.
And honestly, it's the size and sort of strength combination and sort of the style of play that's tantalizing a little bit, right? You kind of see that and you go, oh, we want this guy to do well. I'm not sure why Gray Richards is asking this, but I have not seen any news, so I don't know if you guys have or not. But Ryan Ellis, any update on Ryan Ellis? I thought the general manager for the Flyers before last season, said that the injury was probably career-ending for Ryan Ellis. So, I mean, I will say this. You talk about guys that I just rooted for as just a player for some reason. I always am drawn to players that just sort of have specific types of skills, overcome certain things. And Ryan Ellis is always a guy that I just thought, I really like watching that guy play hockey when he was a Nashville Predator. So he was just one of my favorite players if I had to rank players. But
I think you're drawn to him because of his snarkiness, and he's kind of a low-key dick. I think that's why you're drawn to him.
Oh, I'm snarky and a low-key dick is what I just heard.
No, I think you have an affinity and appreciation for people that can do that and get away with it.
Maybe that's true. This has nothing to do with his personality, by the way. I just he had a nasty slap shot. I thought he was a really good defenseman.
He's a fantastic player. I'll give him that. Yeah. But off the ice, he was kind of a prick to deal with. But yeah, as far as an update,
what is he doing? Yeah.
I mean, there's a video clip of him being an ass to John Glennon, and John Glennon asked a very basic question. So, I mean, he definitely got his feathers ruffled a little too easily.
No one holds a grudge like the media.
Yeah. But yeah, as far as an update, there really hasn't been one. The last thing was the Flyers GM last year basically saying like it's probably a career ender.
Yeah.
I think they're kind of like the whole Shea Weber thing, like don't expect him to play, but keep him on your roster, maybe just in case he can somehow come out and skate for a couple more games. I don't know, but I think that he has a torn muscle in his back that just isn't healing properly, and because of that, he can't have that dangerous slap shot that you were talking about. He can't really defend the way he needs to defend. He can't skate the way he needs to skate. So I think we've seen the last of Ryan Ellis in the NHL. And I don't think there's going to be another update until like he officially files like retirement paperwork.
All right, a couple other questions here. Elliot asks, would a junior hockey team, USHL maybe, work in Tennessee? If so, would you put them in Nashville or another city? And this will kind of lead us into another conversation, but I'm curious what you guys would say to that.
Put them in Clarksville. They got that nice rink. Like, I think it would make a lot of sense, and I think people would go to it. It'd be a good market for it.
Yeah, I think Nashville's a little too oversaturated with the Preds being here, and then kind of just all like the high school hockey stuff that's going on, and just everything else. I think Clarksville's probably a great idea because other than Austin P, there's not really like a booming sports market out there. You have that, like Emma said, you have that really nice rink that the Predators invested a lot of money into, state of the art equipment, everything out there. It would make sense to put a team out there and see if it could work. I mean, TSU starting up an HBCU hockey team here, so I just feel like Nashville. I hate saying that there's too much hockey, but you don't want to oversaturate the market because then everybody's going to suffer. You put it in Clarksville, it's still 30-ish, 35-minute drive for people in Nashville. You can go see it if you want to, but you're not going to have to worry about oversaturating the market with Vanderbilt, MTSU, and then TSU. And the Preds and all that as well.
Well, how much of it is to drive fan interest into the product, and how much of it is to develop young hockey talent in the area? How what's the goal here? Is one of my questions.
If it's a USHL club, it would be to develop talent. But if you're talking about like the people that own the team in whatever facility they're skating at, it's obviously about the money.
Then I would put it in the south of the city. I would put it in this where the most people are playing hockey, which is maybe Murfreesboro. I don't know. There's not like Franklin. There's not a place. And actually was asked about there was a plan, I believe, to have a Williamson County rink like years ago. And I was talking to a buddy of mine whose son plays hockey down there. And basically, for those that don't know, all these rinks that are built, I think there's a Hendersonville conversation as well. You got the Clarksville one that's already done. You got the Fordyce Center out in Bellevue. You got the other one. What's interesting is that a lot of these are paid for and built not by the Preds, by other folks. The Preds sort of put a name on it, and then they run some of the facilities. But where all the kids in the Middle Tennessee area are playing hockey, a lot of it is in South Nashville. A lot of it is Franklin, Brentwood, Williamson County. And for them to not really have a plan for a rink down there, that to me is interesting. And I don't know if that translates into a junior team or not. Is Chattanooga is that too far away? Like I don't know if the goal is to develop talent. I feel like the most young players are down in Williamson County, but I think
Chattanooga is too far away because you're talking about like minimum of 2-hour drive. If it's in Clarksville, 30-40 minutes maybe. If we're talking about just like youth players and we're talking about like that kind of hockey and stuff, the two places that make the most sense to me are Hendersonville and Franklin. Because Hendersonville basically is kind of the hockey hub of Sumner County, and Franklin is basically the same thing for Williamson County. So if we're talking about a youth facility where the high school kids can go and practice so they don't all have to drive to Centennial and worry about skating times and ice times and all that stuff, I think Franklin and Hendersonville are probably your two best bets for that.
Well, and honestly, that's where a lot of parents are frustrated right now, which is like the only place we can go is a 45-minute drive up to Centennial, or in Hendersonville's case, a 45-minute drive down to Centennial. And in the middle of traffic after school on a school night or weeknight is just hard.
That was the biggest complaints I heard from parents when I used to cover the G-Nash League when I worked at Main Street Media, was the kids that were all in Sumner County. They're like, by the time we get done with school, we're so exhausted. Yeah. We don't want to take a 40-minute ride into Nashville to Centennial. And it was the same way with the kids that were in Franklin. They were like, man, we wish we had a rink that was even like 15 minutes closer, because the drive, by the time you get there, then you have to get out and you have to practice, and then the drive back. Like it's a taxing process to do that 3 times a week.
And from what I've been told, a lot of different factors are involved in this, right? The county is doing a lot of the costs. They pay a lot of the stuff. So if that's Sumner County or Williamson County, they're paying the costs. You've got politics involved with people that are in charge, whether it's a mayor or a city council or whatever, whether or not they're going to spend the money on it. Like there's all kinds of stuff, infrastructure, land acquisition. There's all kinds of factors that go into this. But the Preds have taken a pretty, what's the right word? Like a pretty strong stance on growing the game locally. And it feels like some of those things have stalled out a little bit, whether that's Hendersonville or Williamson County, which again is where all the young kids in the market are playing hockey right now. So it is an interesting discussion, interesting conversation, I think.
For sure.
All right. Andrew says, Michael, can we get some additional info on Vasily Atanasov? Did I get that right? Say his name for me.
Oh, Vasily Atanasov?
Atanasov, that's right. I should have known.
You want me to answer this now?
Yeah, go ahead. He says, I know Michael said we extended an offer for training camp and he lit up the KHL, but I don't know anything else about him other than the point total. That was the question from Andrew.
Yeah, so Vasily Atanasov, one of the breakout players of the KHL last year. He was lighting the league up. He was scoring insane between the legs, highlight reel goals. 19 goals and 40 points in 46 games. His season kind of got derailed a little bit in January. He suffered a pretty bad knee injury, kept him out for a few months, came back, skated in a couple games. The thing with Atanasov is his elite prospects page lists him at 5'11", 148 pounds. If you're going to play in the NHL, you need to be a lot bigger than that. The last I heard, he was putting on weight. I think he's around 155-ish pounds right now. You'd probably want that number to be closer to 165, just if you're going to withstand the rigors, especially playing in an Andrew Burnett system where you're getting hit quite a bit. But yeah, basically what happened with him is he was passed over 3 times in the NHL draft. He was having a breakout season in the KHL, started to get some attention from some NHL teams. I was able to confirm that Dennis Stolpico, the Preds international European scout, spoke with him about possibly joining the team. And the answer I think that he gave was kind of like, I might be ready in a year or two. I'll circle back with you. A couple other teams, I don't know exactly who, spoke with him. And then after he came back from his injury, I believe it was in March, a couple teams offered him tryouts to attend training camp. I believe the Preds were one of them based off of what I was told. And basically what happens, he just re-signed a 2-year deal with Torpedo in the KHL. So I think if he attends a training camp, I don't know if it'll be with the Predators or any other team, it would probably be more of a feeling out process to see if he can handle skating on the North American ice. Can he handle playing against these bigger players in a better league? And then there'll probably be, if he makes a good impression, there'll probably be a contract offer extended to him. He'll either play out his 2 years in the KHL before he comes over, or he'll do with what Torpedo did with Nikolai Kovalenko last year. He signed his entry-level contract with the Avalanche, but the conditions of that were if he wasn't in the NHL, he was on loan to the KHL, and he could play with his team until he was ready to join the NHL. So that's probably what's going to happen with Atanasov. I've heard that the Preds have shown the most interest in him. Again, I don't know what the other teams are that have been talking to him, but I've heard that the Preds have shown the most interest in him. Whether he wants to play in a market like Nashville, I mean, there's a couple Russians here that I think he would probably hit it off with, but also they got rid of Trenin, they got rid of Afanasyev, they might be getting rid of Askarov, so I don't know if that will play a factor into it at all, but he's someone to keep an eye on. I think he'll end up in the NHL probably in 2 or 3 years, whether it's with Nashville or not, I don't know.
First of all, I don't think I've been 148 pounds since like 8th grade, so that's a very small person to be playing professional hockey. That's more of a statement about me and how I've taken care of myself, or lack thereof, over the last 20 years.
What did someone call you on YouTube? Husky Max Keller? Kellerman?
I feel like all of that's insulting, and I've been working very hard to lose weight, okay? Like, I've been working out like 4 times a week. I've been trying, okay? I've been trying here, guys. I'm not a small person. All right, what Mr. Brazil says, and I've got one answer for this. This is Jonathan Marshall's burner account, of course. What's a former Preds player, allegedly? What's a former Preds player that you would bring back, former or currently playing? Unpopular opinions only. I will start. I would like the head of communications for the Nashville Predators to be Mike Ribeiro. It says unpopular opinions only.
I don't even know what to say.
I want Mike Ribeiro to do.
Are we assigning them like a new role in the organization, or are we just bringing them back?
I just want Ribeiro to have to be the face of the franchise. if we're talking about unpopular opinions.
I would go with.
I tried to think of the worst possible thing I could think of. That's it.
I'd go with Yannick Weber as the penalty kill coach.
Oh wow. Okay. All right. Emma, what you got?
I don't know.
Unpopular opinions.
Well, my unpopular opinion, I mean, I don't have a specific role for him, but just because I like stirring the pot, I'd say Matt Duchene.
Yeah. Yep. I knew that was coming. I knew that one was coming. All right, last question here, and then we'll let you all go. Brad asked a really good question on the chat. He says, random question, with Bridgestone Arena now 25 years, and honestly, I think this could be a much longer conversation that we have at another time, because I'm fascinated now with stadiums and arenas and the lifespan of these buildings. And frankly, for those that don't know, if you're a new Preds fan, like downtown Broadway and downtown Nashville does not exist if they do not build Bridgestone Arena where they did. And there wasn't always going to be an arena there where they built it. They were actually talking about a lot of other places to build it. So there's really probably a deeper dive into this at some point during the summer. But Brad says, with Bridgestone Arena over 25 years old now, closing in on 30, are the Preds looking across the river with envious eyes and wishing to emulate what the Titans are doing with their new facility? Does Bill Haslam being owner now increase the chances of a new or revisioned barn for the Preds? Side note, I think Bridgestone holds up incredibly well for its age, opposed to Nissan Stadium, which has been terrible, by the way. That's me adding that. The experience is still pretty top level, but at what point does it start to wane? I do think they need to freshen things up. I think there can be, like, this is a weird interior design comment, but I feel like it needs to be lighter in the building.
It is very dark.
It feels very like the barrel house is very dark and ominous. There's not a lot of, like, it just feels real dark and kind of, it does feel like it's about 25 years old. 0% chance that they're across the river ever. Are they looking over there and saying, oh, would I like to have a $2 billion stadium? Yeah, probably, paid for by the state, the league, and taxpayers. I think that's certainly obvious. I would guess that there's probably a big renovation coming at some point. They've had lots of talks, right, about putting that hotel right there, right, and building that. So I do think there's some stuff coming, but
I actually have some really good insight into this.
Oh, let's go.
So
so this will be fun.
So when I got my when I first got the job at the Nashville Post, one of the first interviews I did was with Sean Henry, and he kind of gave me a behind the scenes peek at what he had planned, and he was talking about all of these things that he wanted to do. They were investing in the building. Obviously, COVID and the pandemic kind of derailed most of those. But from what I remember from that conversation, all the media will be happy about this. There is talk of building an actual press box, because right now we have a press area where the fans can just aimlessly wander into our seats, which is slightly irritating. But there were talks of building an actual press box. There are talks of adding some expanded seating. There are talks of doing some more premium seating for the season ticket holders. And that was the big thing that Sean Henry talked about, was wanting to take care of the season ticket holders, because they're basically the people that keep the lights on. And I think, in my opinion, Bridgestone has held up really well. It's been well maintained. It's still one of the top NHL arenas. It's obviously a great venue for concerts. I don't think there's any talk of potentially looking to build another one, because I think Bridgestone Arena has staying power. Like, it's good enough that you can do some renovations and some slight upgrades every 5, 10, 15 years, whatever you want to do, and you still have a really good arena. I do agree. Location. Yeah, I mean, it's they're not going to move from where they are, because you walk out the doors, you're right on Broadway. I mean, that's what you want. You want your fans leaving a game, going out and celebrating on Broadway. So,
and it's how you sell tickets to other teams and
exactly, yeah. So I think the location is prime, that they're never going to move from that location, and I think that there's going to be some renovations done. I think if the stuff that Sean Henry told me about a couple of years ago actually happens, there's going to be a lot of happy fans in a couple of years, because they do have big plans for that building.
Yep.
Yes. And to add to that, to answer the Bill Haslam portion of that question, unequivocally, yes, he is going to be a big factor, and, he wants upgrades to that building. Mike touched on more of the fan facing stuff, but kind of more behind the scenes. It's been, and this is probably Bill Haslam, and honestly, Barry Trotz has been one of the biggest critics, and I don't think he has many people disagreeing with him, of the Predators practice facility at Centennial. It's frankly embarrassing. It's the same like it's been their practice facility since 1998, and I don't think it's been upgraded since 1998, and it's terrible. And they need something better. And I get people asking me a lot, like, well, why don't they just use Fort Ice and Bellevue and things like that? It's like, well, first of all, Bellevue is a bitch to get to. No one is going to want to go all the way out there. Second of all, the Preds, they invested a lot of money into those Fort Ice facilities, and they own them and run them. But like, those are money makers for them, because it was a big deal this year when they decided to move training camp to Bellevue, which I think was a good move, by the way, but it would not be sustainable for an entire season, because you basically have to put everything on hold, like all of the like youth programs and adult leagues and whatever else is happening there, skating lessons, and
Yep.
you have to cancel all of that. And you lose revenue that way. And so, yes, those facilities are nicer, but the Preds are never going to move there full time. But between Bill Haslam and Barry Trotz, I would say absolutely a new practice facility is a priority. And I have, again, I would not count on this being an announcement anytime soon or anything, but just based on things that I've heard from high-ranking people in the organization, that there has been some kind of exploration of what it would look like, because obviously they don't have any more room on the Bridgestone property, right? Like there's no more room there, but there is a lot of space that they technically own underground. And so there has been talk of expanding to include an on-site practice facility underground. Think like if you know where the Lexus Lounge is, like back behind that, and behind where the locker rooms are. So there are a lot of teams in the league that have something like that. New Jersey has it. Edmonton has it, a practice facility on site. It's incredibly convenient, and really anything would be an upgrade over Centennial right now. So I would count on that being a priority for this organization.
This is why you stay to the end, folks. Let's call this informed speculation. I would also not be surprised if another sport in general became a part of our city, and that maybe Municipal Auditorium is a part of this conversation with a major renovation and upgrade to Municipal Auditorium, which would be required should said sport ever decide to come to Nashville. And then, hypothetically, if one person were to own both said sports teams and happen to be a capital B billionaire, hypothetically, the teams could use the buildings interchangeably, as needed and as required. So just all hypothetically, just floating random stuff out after an hour and 3 minutes of conversation. I just want to float that out there. And if you want to jump into the group chat at Lower Broad Hockey, maybe I'll give you some more details. I've probably already given away too much. But it should be very interesting to see what is going to happen with facilities in general around the Predators over the next 10 years. In general, I think that's an interesting conversation that's being had, Emma, to your point, right now. For sure.
I would definitely love to see a new practice facility, because as much as I love Centennial, and I like that place, it's got a near and dear place in my heart because I covered the G Nash Hockey League there.
Good parking.
Great parking lot, like tons of spaces. And I had some friends that skated on like the D League there and stuff like that. And there's a lot of good memories there, but it's a very dingy, gross, old, dirty facility. And
there's
I get
no
it.
workspace for people like us. There's no place to sit and work unless you want your ass to fall asleep on a wooden bleacher, and then
the Wi-Fi shoddy.
Yes, maybe get hepatitis trying to go to the bathroom in the prison toilets.
All right, so
my first Centennial experience was my first training camp 2 years ago. A creature that I'm fairly certain was a rat ran across my foot while I was waiting for Matthias Ekholm to come and do his media availability. And that told me pretty much all I needed to know about Centennial.
Yeah. My daughter's first ever skating lesson was at Centennial Sportsplex, and she left crying. That's all. That's
I
all.
cannot.
She was
tell-
like
as
4.
a-
She was like 4. Maybe it was a little early. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know. I mean, as a woman, if you have ever had to use the restroom at Centennial
Yeah, it's bad.
Sportsplex, I'm
It's bad.
so sorry. It's like I've never been to prison, but I feel like that's what a prison bathroom.
And I've done some like pickup stuff with guys where you go do like open skate, you know, like on
Uh-huh.
Tuesdays at 9 o'clock or whatever. Like the locker rooms are so incredibly tiny and disgusting. It's
They're
just
so gross.
it smells so bad. Which brings us right to and Dark, I apologize it took us so long to get to this question, but you asked it earlier in the show. I hope you stuck around. This isn't exactly Preds related, but just kind of curious if y'all have any insights. What would the best way to work in the sports? What's the best way to work in the sports industry? Love all the work y'all have done so far with Lower Broad Hockey. Appreciate that. But as I will start, because as we all just explained,
Rule number 1: get to know Braden Gall.
No, not at all. It's a labor of love, and do not expect to be glamorous or well compensated at the beginning of your career.
Don't do it for the money.
You are not doing it for the money. You're not doing it for the fame. You're not doing it for anything. You're definitely not doing it for the likes or the comment section. That's for fucking sure. So you're doing it because you love the sport. You're passionate about telling stories, and you are willing to work your ass off and learn everything you can to make yourself valuable to somebody out there. That would be my sort of Cliff Notes version. If you can get past like 6 years in the business, maybe 7 or 8, and you still like it and you're still able to pay your bills, then you're probably going to have a career. It chews people up and it spits people out so fast because so many people want to do it. And that's sort of my spiel on media as it pertains to Dark's question.
Yeah, I think that's the best piece of advice I was ever given in college was working in sports. You need to be prepared. You need to go into it understanding that someone will gladly do your job for free. And if you don't have that mindset, you're not going to make it. And thinking about that has gotten me through to where I am today. There was a point a couple years ago, ironically, right before I got my job at the Nashville Post in 2019, where I was very close to going back to school and picking out a new career because I was at the end of my rope, because I was where you were at, Braden, where I was 6-7 years into this and I hadn't made it where I wanted to be. I was like, I'm busting my ass. I'm writing all this stuff. I'm doing what I think is great work and no one sees or appreciates it. Little did I know, I just had to wait for the right opportunity to come along. And that opportunity came along because the Nashville Post is where I interned. And I think that would be another thing I would say is find someone that you admire, you look up to, and this is sports writing in particular for me, but this could be anywhere in the sports media field. Find someone that you like their work, you admire, and that you want to spend time around. For me, it was David Beauclair. I spent a year interning with him for free, and it was a labor of love. I did all the things he didn't want to do. I wrote about all the things that he didn't have time for, and every question he asked me, my response was, yes, sir. I did what he told me to. I read everything he told me to. You basically have to kind of accept that that's what it's going to be like breaking into it. And the last thing I'll say is also don't be afraid to just reach out to people, talk to people, ask people questions. I've learned so many things from a lot of accomplished people that maybe I didn't get a job with their company, but we had a 15-minute long conversation and I came away as a better journalist because I got to pick their brain about things. I got to ask them questions. And if you get a no, don't look at it as like, oh, I'm not good enough. Look at it as like, it's not my time yet for that job or whatever you're trying to do. And then don't be afraid to ask, like, what could I have done to be better prepared for this? What could make me stand out better? Ask those kind of questions. I had one interview.
It's also part of the job. Like,
yeah,
is to pester people, be annoying, ask a lot of questions, learn, be curious. When I was a producer, my first job was be a bulldog. Like, I'm just not going to stop bothering you until you come on the show.
Yeah. I've heard similar stuff like that too. Like I had a job with Fox Sports that I was a finalist for. I ultimately didn't get it. I emailed the hiring managers, like, what made this other person stand out over me? Like, what could I have done? And he basically said, we feel like you're a little too passive. The person in this role, we need them to be more aggressive and to go and do the things and say the uncomfortable things. And we just didn't feel like you were kind of there yet. And I was like, fair enough. And I learned from that, like, okay, I need to be a little bit more aggressive. Sometimes I can be a little bit too aggressive, but it's a learning process.
A low-key dick, perhaps.
Yeah. It's a learning process. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Bug as many people as you can. Send them email requests. If you have their number, text them. Always just pick people's brains because you're going to get better by learning from people that have done it before you.
Good stuff, Mike. Emma?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that whatever opportunities you get, you know, it may not be what you think is the opportunity that you are looking for. You may have something. I get this a lot with the younger generation now, I think too, is that people kind of expect that immediate gratification. And it's like, I want to work, I want to be an NHL writer, for example, and like that, I will accept nothing less than that. That's what I want to do. If you get offered an opportunity, and I may or may not be speaking from very personal experience, if you want to be an NHL writer and you get offered an opportunity as an NHL photographer, then you fucking take it and you get your foot in the door. I had zero interest in photography, okay? But that was the opportunity that I had.
Yeah.
I got my foot in the door. I met a ton of people that way. But you learn the hockey world, the sports world is very small. And so you make those connections and you build up your own reputation. So people know who you are. They know your face. They know your name. And it also shows that you're willing to do things. I mean, it's a cliche about like being a team player, but that is more relevant in the sports industry than anywhere, I think, because they, again, like Mike said, there's going to be someone who's willing to do your job for free. And the fact that, like the quickest way to edge yourself out of a sports job, or really any job, I would think, is to say, well, that's not under my purview, or that's not really what I'm interested in doing.
Yep. Learn how to do it.
Like learn how to do it. My first job was in baseball as a communications director. I was out on the field at 5 a.m. pulling tarp when it rained. Like that's just what you did. And it's one of those things that had nothing to do with my job description, but it's more of a test of like, if someone asked me to do that, of course I wanted to say no. Who wants to do that? But like, I wasn't going to say, well, that's, let's let someone else do that. Or I don't want to do that, because I was brand new. And that's how you show that you're willing to work your ass off and put in the effort.
There's
like no job in sports that can't get you another job in sports, even if it's in an unrelated field. So like Dark said, he wants to go into sports marketing. If you're interning somewhere and you're doing sports broadcasting, that can absolutely lead to sports marketing. So if you're in sports and you're not necessarily, like Emma said, you're not doing what you want to, that always keep that mindset that this could lead to that job, or there's someone here that I'm going to get to know, network with, whatever, that can help me get there. And the last thing I want to say too is network your ass off, man. That's the biggest thing. Make sure, even if they don't know who you are, just make sure that they recognize your face. The first day of the draft last year, I went up to Elliot Friedman. I follow him, big fan of him, love everything he does. I introduced myself. I'm like, hi, I'm Michael Gallagher, write for Nashville Hockey Now. Just want to introduce myself. I'm a big fan of yours. He was like, cool, nice to meet you. By the second day of the draft, I ran into him again in the hallway. Never even talked to him after I introduced myself. He was like, hey, Mike, and he patted me on the back. Like, he probably might not remember that, but I do. But network and do stuff like that, because they may not remember your name, but if they recognize your face, that will help you out a lot.
Well, and the marketing side of this, like, you could come into the sports industry through the marketing door as well. Like, that's a different doorway and different path that could get you to where you're going. Look, I took a $20,000 a year job producing a radio show on Sirius 123. Wasn't even Sirius XM. Out of Brentwood, Tennessee. I made absolutely no money. I was fired after 2 years, and now I host radio shows on ESPN and run the company here. You don't know what your journey is going to be. My show on 102.5 was canceled. You don't know. Adversity is an opportunity. It's all the cliche stuff you teach your kids. Nothing worth doing is easy. It's like all the stuff you teach that I'm trying to teach my kids. I know you guys don't have any, so. I'm trying to teach my daughters, like, because there's a lot of entitlement in my two little knuckleheads that I love dearly.
That's what I was saying about the younger generation. I feel like now it's the immediate gratification, the entitlement. Like, I want what I want and I want it now. And I mean, I will be the first to admit I am not a patient person. And so I understand that it's not easy to kind of take your lumps and work your way through, but just to add to what Mike was saying about, one job in sports will lead to another. I cannot tell you how plentiful the opportunities are for people looking to get into the industry in ticket sales. And I know that sounds like a terrible job to a lot of people, including myself. However, I can also not tell you how many people I know who got their foot in the industry, like I did with photography, a lot of people did with ticket sales, because there's a lot of turnover in those jobs, and there are a lot of entry level positions, and that's where you get your foot in, like even if you don't want a career out of that. So just try to keep an open mind.
This also goes without saying too, but I feel like it just needs to be said. If you're a woman trying to make it in sports too, do not let anyone tell you that you can't do this job. Some of the most badass people I know in the sports media field are women. Teresa Walker will school any Titans writer on anything Titans related. Emma with the Preds. I mean, Emily Proud with college football. Like, if you are a woman trying to make it in this industry and someone tells you no, use that as fuel to prove them wrong. Because, like I said, a lot of women in this industry can do this job a lot better than men can.
So this was like a parenting / career seminar / coaching pep talk all at one time at the end of the show. So,
this is what you get from Lower Broad Hockey.
I like it. I like it. No, it's very. It's. I think we've all said that. This is the other thing, and Emma, to your point about the younger generation, we'll let everybody go here. It seems like young folk, and I'm going to be the old guy here that's yelling at clouds, get off my porch, go touch grass. Put your fucking screens down. As I ask you to rate, review, subscribe to everything that we've got. A little discomfort is good. A little discomfort is healthy. Like a little adversity is good for you. All right. Like it's just, you can't just run away at the first sign of a tiny little bit of discomfort in your life. It's not, to your point, Emma, if your goal is X, I want to be an NHL writer, make that your North Star at all times, but you better understand that you're not going from 1 to 0 to 60. It's not how it's going to happen. You can get there if you're determined enough and you work hard enough, but you're going to have to take a really random and probably bizarre and different route than you thought. But that's the nature of the business.
And keep in mind that the jobs that turn out to be shitty jobs that you maybe thought were your dream and thought it was going to be amazing, and it turns out to be really terrible, that experience is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than getting the job of your dreams, because it teaches you a lot about yourself, a lot about the industry, and it ultimately ends up leading you to where you're going to be most happy and most fulfilled.
Imagine this, young people. I've worked for people who are shitty at their job at a shitty company. And I've worked for really great people at great companies. And sometimes there's a shitty person at a great company and a great person at a shitty company. And guess what? You gotta be able to navigate all of it. It's just how the world works, man. And now I'm done talking to my children on the podcast. Thank you.
I will add to what Emma just said, the disappointment and stuff too. Don't let that worry you at all too. I interviewed for a couple jobs at the Tennessee and I didn't ultimately get. And I found out later on that I was making more as a high school sports reporter for a rival company than I would have been had I got those jobs. So sometimes not getting the job is a blessing in disguise.
I think making fun of Gannett is the perfect way to end. Oh, Reach. Man. All right. So appreciate both of you guys and your journeys to get here. It's my journey. Don't devalue my journey, guys. We do appreciate all you guys for listening and for watching, and sign up at Lower Broad Hockey. We've got lots of big news coming. So stay tuned for that. We're going to have you covered all summer long. We'll kind of slow build up to the season. And then once we get to September, there's going to be a lot of fun stuff. So you're going to want to be over there and be a part of that. We've got lots of stuff coming. So Emma, where can they find you and your work? You got the It's All Your Fault podcast. You got the hockey news. You got Locked On. Where can they find you?
All of those places. And you can find me on social media at Emma_Lingan. You can also, as Braden mentioned, get my pithy, banter-filled NHL weekly newsletter on Fridays if you subscribe to Lower Broad Hockey.
And Mike?
You can read all of my hockey-related writing at Lower Broad Hockey, and you can find me on Twitter at MGSports_ and every week here on the Gold Standard.
Follow the socials, subscribe over at Lower Broad Hockey, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. If you're watching us, we do appreciate you guys for jumping into the comment section as well. And make sure you give us a thumbs up on the YouTube page as well as a share on Twitter and Facebook. I think that just about does it for us. This extra long media career advice version of the Gold Standard podcast. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for hanging out. For Emma and Mike, I am Braden. Have a great week, everybody. We will talk to you guys next time.